Today is the first day of May. And what does May make you think of? Now, you might give a nice holy and devotional answer like, May is the month of Mary. That's a good one. You might also recognize that today is normally the memorial of St. Joseph the Worker. Another good one. You could have other answers. You might say, Mother's Day is coming up next week, so don't forget moms. Maybe your birthday is in May. In fact, maybe this May you celebrate your 40th birthday. That'd be fun. Another really big event in May, and this is what I want to focus on, is graduation. Is anyone here graduating this May? A few people, good, congratulations. May, of course, is the time of most college and high school graduations, and those are exciting times. Over the years, you put in tons of work, and a graduation is the time you celebrate the completion. And along with the celebration, people also spend time reflecting on the struggles of the journey and considering the future. Today's scripture seems to me like reflections on the graduation of St. Peter. So let me explain that in three parts. First, Peter's growth in faith. Second, Peter's growth in love. And third, Peter's example for us. So first of all, Peter's growth in faith. At a graduation, it's not unusual to talk about the beginning of the journey. You might say, remember when we started? And let's ask that question for St. Peter. If we turn back in our Bibles to Luke chapter 5, we find Simon, because Jesus had not given him the name Peter yet, doing his normal job. He was fishing. Jesus got into Simon's boat so he could teach the people along the shore, and when he was done, he told Simon to lower his nets to catch some fish. So just imagine Simon as this expert fisherman being told how to do his job by some dude who was a preacher. So Simon explains that they've been working at it all night with no success, but out of respect for Jesus, he drops his nets into the water. And when he pulled them out, there were so many fish filling his nets that they were breaking. He had to call over his partners to help, James and John. And how did Simon Peter react to this? He fell at the feet of Jesus and said, "Depart from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." Jesus was undeterred and told Simon that he would not be catching fish anymore. Instead, he would be bringing people to Christ. So there's our reflection on where it all started for Peter. After his time with Jesus, how is he different at graduation? And that's what our gospel shares today. The scene is almost exactly the same. Peter, James, and John are fishing, and like before, they have no success, and Jesus appears and tells them to drop their nets. Now, in the first scene, Jesus was mostly a stranger to them. This time, Jesus appears to be a stranger. Also, like before, they drop their nets and bring in a huge haul of fish. So what's changed in this scene now that they've graduated from their time with Jesus Christ? Primarily, the reaction of Peter. In the first episode, he tells Jesus to leave him alone. This time, when he realized Jesus was there, he tucked in his garment, jumped into the water, and swam 100 yards to the shore just to see Jesus. Imagine the change St. Peter had undergone from a man asking Jesus to go away to a man at the first hint of Jesus flings himself into the water to have a moment with him. St. Josemaria Escriva calls this action of Peter a personification of faith. We should ask ourselves, where am I? Do I chase Jesus away? Or am I ready to leap at the chance of just a moment with him? And you might consider how you felt driving to Mass this morning. Were you excited to the point of jumping into the car to be with Jesus in Scripture and in the Eucharist? So second, Peter's faith grew over the years, but so did his love. So back to the idea of a graduation. If you ever need a really good cry, go to a nursing graduation ceremony. The ones I've attended have slideshows and stories of the mistakes, struggles, pains, and problems they've overcome. It's emotionally moving to see someone turn from their low points to the achievement of a diploma. Now, as for Peter, We just need to turn back a few pages from today's gospel reading to find out where his low point was. In his last moments with Jesus before his passion and crucifixion, Peter promised undying loyalty to Christ. Only hours later, Peter watched the trial of Jesus from a distance. Peter sat around a fire with strangers. One person pointed to Peter and recognized him as a friend of Jesus. Peter replied, "Woman, I do not know him." Another agreed that he was a follower. Peter said, "I am not." Again, someone recognized him as a companion of Jesus, and Peter replied, "I do not know what you're saying." Just as those words came out, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Can you even imagine the feeling Peter had in that moment? He had sworn loyalty, and now he had denied his friend, his teacher, his God. Maybe we can imagine it. How often do we deny our connection to Jesus? And when Jesus turns to look at us in that moment, do we stop in our sadness and weep like Peter? Or do we just turn our heads to avoid eye contact with Jesus? That was terribly sad for Peter, but he returned to Jesus, and today's gospel shows us his final exam before his graduation. Again, Peter sits around a fire. In fact, the word used by John is the Greek word anthrachia to describe the fire. It's an odd word to describe the fire, and it is the word John also used to describe the first fire Peter was at during Jesus' trial. So clearly there's a connection between those two moments. At the first fire, Peter denied Jesus 3 times, so Jesus has 3 questions for him. "Simon, do you love me more than these?" Peter answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Good answer, Peter. 1 correct. "Simon, do you love me?" Peter must have figured it was the same question so he could give the same answer. "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." 2 for 2. "Simon, do you love me?" Now, Peter must have been frustrated, but he answered well a final time, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." He got a perfect score. What a beautiful moment that must have been. Jesus has allowed Peter to overcome his 3 denials with 3 professions of love. Now, I also reflected on this as someone who's written an exam questions many, many times before. I'll tell you that I don't write the questions so students can tell me the answer, because I know the answer. I need the students to know that they know the answer. So I would suggest we see Jesus doing the same thing here. He's forgiving Peter in this moment. He's also teaching Peter. Jesus reminds him of his low point, but also wants Peter to know he has graduated beyond that. Peter has grown in love. So third, let's put all of this together and consider Peter's example for us. And let's start by asking, what was Jesus trying to teach Peter? And let's look at the last line of the gospel today. Jesus told Peter, "Follow me." At the first calling of the apostles, the Gospel of Matthew quotes Jesus saying, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Just after Peter professes Jesus as the Christ in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says to take up your cross daily and follow me. How does Peter respond to these instructions? So as we've seen, he jumps into the water to follow Jesus. He gladly professes his love for Jesus at the fire. He boldly preaches to bring others to Christ like we saw in the first reading today. He takes up his cross literally by eventually being crucified for his connection to Jesus. So what about us? Do we excitedly follow Jesus? Just looking around our parish for the last week, I see some examples of where we do exactly that. We bring Christ to Honduras through our mission, and you can support them today by buying some tacos after Mass. Our young adult ministry has grown like crazy. In just a handful of months, they have 130 members. Father Jesse is organizing our pro-life efforts at the parish, and that group is going to flourish. However, I think if you ask the folks in those groups or any groups if that's enough, I think they'd agree that's not enough. When Jesus asks you, "Do you love me?" do you say, "Yep, I bought some tacos"? Or do you say, "I'm going to join the mission team"? When Jesus asks you, "Do you love me?" do you say, "Yep, I'm on the young adult group me"? Or do you say, "I'm going to connect our ministry with the food pantry"? When Jesus asks you, "Do you love me?" do you say, "Yes, I'm pro-life"? Or do you say, "I'm going to volunteer 3 hours of my time every week at Loving Choice Pregnancy Center"? Just like Peter, we need to dive in and follow Jesus. As we consider Peter's story in these Easter readings, let's remember Easter is about the resurrection, and y'all, Easter is not over. If you stick with my analogy, Easter is the Christian graduation. It's a graduation bigger than any other. It's a graduation from death to life. And it's not a celebration for one day. Easter is a season. Even more so, Easter should be the rest of our lives. We need to celebrate the victory of Jesus Christ over our worst enemy. That's death. Are you ready to share in that excitement? Are you ready to dive in just like Peter did? Are you ready to profess your love for Jesus? Peter graduated and applied his lessons. So our challenge for this week is to follow that example of Peter. Get excited. Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. Pray today and tell Jesus how much you love him, and then go out there and dive into whatever Jesus calls you to do. St. Anthony of Padua.